Want to go from just mashing your basic attack string to something more like this. Let me show you how. So first things first, you have your basic attack string, which is just using your left mouse button. Holding your left mouse button will trigger a branch attack, which can vary depending on the character you're using, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll just showcase Daffodil. Next, we have your character skill, which you can cast by just pressing your E key. Lastly, we have your character ultimates, which you can activate by pressing your Q key. NTE also has a parry mechanic, which allows you to interrupt an enemy's telegraphed attack. Not all attacks are parryable though, so keep that in mind, and there will always be a visual indicator when an attack is parryable. All you have to do to parry is execute any attack, so that could be your basic, plunge, redirect skill, character swap in, or Esper cycle attacks, as the two rings converge and flash yellow. Now you might have noticed that I triggered some parries while the circles were not overlapping and flashing yellow. I'm not sure if this is intended, but I did find that the timing on redirect skill, character swap in, and Esper cycle parries can be triggered before the circles fully overlap. Now let's talk about Esper cycles. Simply put, an Esper cycle is your typical elemental reaction combo. Each character in NTE will have an elemental attribute associated with them, and certain attributes can combine with one another to generate a combat effect. Esper cycles will be the key combat mechanic that most of your combat and team building will revolve around. Do keep in mind though that you cannot trigger every Esper cycle due to the team size and elemental chaining restrictions, since you are only allowed to have 4 characters in your team, and only adjacent elements can combine to create an Esper cycle. I'll be putting up a chart on screen with all of the duo and trio elemental reactions. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. So, how do you trigger Esper cycles? Every character has a cycle gauge on the left side right next to their HP bar, and to trigger an Esper cycle with that character, you just have to fully charge up their gauge. In order to fill up the gauge, you simply have to hit the enemy with your basic attack, redirect skill, ultimate skill, or a parry. Do note that each type of attack will generate a different amount of the gauge bar, and a successful parry will generate a huge chunk of the gauge. Any character that has a viable elemental combination will have a special visual indicator around their character portrait to let you know that you can swap off to them to trigger an Esper cycle. Now that you understand the basic mechanics, let's dive right into combat. I'll be using the Blossom team with Nanali as the main damage carry, Yuan as the sub DPS, Zero as the main Esper cycle enabler because her skill instantly maxes the cycle gauge, and Hotori as the nuker at the end of the rotation. So I start off my rotation here with an Esper cycle with Nanali to trigger Blossom and spawn turret fields. Then I trigger another Esper cycle with Totori to spawn even more turrets for more damage. I then cast Hotori's skill to record the next 3 instances of support or redirect skills used by my other characters. Since I can trigger another Esper cycle, I swap to Ju-Yuan and use her ultimate, then her skill. It's important to use Ju-Yuan's ult, then skill here, because the skill will trigger a dot effect on the boss, and the ult will trigger that dot effect for a burst of damage, then clear it. I want the damage tick from the dot effect to continuously do chip damage, so I ult, then skill. I swap in Zero to record her support skill, then ult for damage. Then I swap in Nanali to skill, ult, and arc skill to do my burst of damage. I noticed that my Hotori's resource bar is filled, which means her ult is ready. The boss is also charging up an attack, so I can swap to her, parry, and then ult. After Hotori's ult, I trigger an Esper cycle with Ju-Yuan to refresh the Blossom turrets. I then use all of her Rose bullets and skill to refresh the dot debuff. Then I swap in Zero and use her skill to get a full gauge for my next cycle, then ultimate for damage. I swap Nanali back in to do her damage rotation, then I parry with Zero. Then I swap Nanali back in to finish her rotation, and proc another Esper cycle with Hotori. Hotori then ults and closes out the fight. That is it for this combat guide video. Let me know your thoughts on the combat system in NTE, as well as your favorite Esper Cycle archetype team in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and catch you all in the next one.